I was almost asleep when the doorbell rang. My son and his wife showed up with 2 suitcases. "We're moving in!" Then my daughter-in-law handed me a list of rules. Breakfast ready by 6 a.m. Bathrooms cleaned every night. Shirts pressed, dresses hung, not folded. I simply smiled. At 6 the next morning, the bacon went into the pan at 5:45. 6 strips laid out straight because the list said breakfast ready by 6, and I have never once in my life been late for a job. Eggs over easy, the way her list specified, right down to the runny yolk. Coffee on the table at 6 sharp. 2 mugs for them, 1 for me. Cream on the left because the list had opinions about that too. My daughter-in-law came downstairs at 6:04 in a robe the color of oatmeal. She stopped at the end of the counter and looked over the plates the way a manager approves a shift, not a thank you, an inspection. Then she gave one small nod, sat down, and unlocked her phone. My son came down 3 minutes later with his shirt untucked and his eyes on the floor. He sat, he ate, he did not look at me once. 35 years old, and he ate his eggs like a man who owed money to everyone at the table. I stood at the stove with my coffee and watched them. And I want to be honest with you about what I felt, because this story does not work if I lie to you. I did not feel angry, not yet. Mostly I felt like a man watching weather roll in over a field he has already harvested. The night before, the doorbell had gone off at 9:47. Not one polite ring. 3 long presses, the kind that assume your time belongs to them. I was in my chair with the lamp on, half asleep over a paperback, and my knees complained the whole way to the door. When I opened it, there was my boy under the porch light, older around the eyes than I remembered, and beside him his wife in a cream coat, holding a leather tote like a briefcase. 2 suitcases sat on the welcome mat, more bags in the back of their vehicle, hatch still open. "We're moving in," he said, "just for a little while." The lease situation got messy. I had not seen my son in 7 months. No call ahead, no question mark anywhere in that sentence. And before I could open my mouth, his wife reached into the tote and handed me a laminated sheet of paper with both hands, formal as a diploma. "House rules," it said across the top. "Breakfast ready by 6 a.m. Bathrooms cleaned every night. Shirts pressed, dresses hung, not folded." There were 9 items. I read all 9 on my own doormat while my son studied the porch boards. I want you to understand something. I am 68 years old. I raised that boy in this house. I buried his mother from this house, and a woman I have shared maybe 11 meals with in my life stood on my porch and handed me my chores. So yes, I smiled. I stepped aside and said, "Come on in," and I meant it, and I slept fine. Because here's the part nobody standing on that porch knew. The week before the doorbell rang, I had done something quiet, something signed, something sitting in a folder in my truck and in a storage unit 11 minutes away with my name on the door. I had not told a single soul except the man who lives across the street. They brought rules into my house. I had already brought something into theirs. They just could not see it yet. You should know who you are dealing with before we go on, because my daughter-in-law never bothered to find out. I spent 39 years in heating and cooling, furnaces, ductwork, crawl spaces. I have been under more houses in this county than the man who reads the water meters. You learn something down there that people who buy granite countertops never learn. You learn what a house actually is. It is not paint and it is not flow, whatever that means. It is joists and copper and the patience of whoever keeps it standing. I know what this house is worth from the inside, down to the last elbow joint, because I sweated half of them myself. My wife and I bought the place the spring after we married. 31 years of mortgage payments, 1 roof, 2 water heaters, a kitchen we redid in stages whenever the overtime allowed. She planted a garden along the back fence, tomatoes and zinnias and a stubborn rose bush that outlived her, and I still weeded every Saturday because stopping felt like losing her twice. She has been gone 4 years. Cancer, 14 months from the first scan to the last morning, and I nursed her through all of it in the bedroom at the top of the stairs. There are pencil marks inside the pantry door frame where we measured our boy every birthday from 2 to 15. She would stand him against the wood and press down his cowlick and tell him to quit growing. He never listened. After the funeral, the calls from my son thinned out the way water finds a leak. Every year a little less. The last time the 2 of them visited before the doorbell rang was a birthday lunch, mine 16 months back. His wife spent most of it walking the rooms with her phone out. "Good bones," she said, standing in my hallway. "Good bones." I thought she was being polite. It took me a long time to understand she was taking measurements. Then last winter, I said something at a holiday phone call about the stairs getting taller every year, the way old men joke, and 2 weeks later, a glossy brochure showed up in my mailbox for a senior living community 2 towns over, a place with a fountain and a craft room. I never found out for certain which one of them mailed it, but it came with a sticky note in her handwriting. Just something to think about, with an exclamation point. I did not call about the brochure. I did not call them either, and they did not call me, and that is how 7 months of silence happens between a father and a son. Not with a fight, with a sticky note. I am telling you all this so you understand the state of things when those suitcases hit my porch. They thought they were moving in with a lonely old widower who had a big empty house and a soft spot for his boy. They were half right. The house was big, and I was lonely, and my spot for that boy is soft to this day. But the house, well, the house was already spoken for, in a way none of them had imagined, and I had the paperwork to prove it. The first week I followed every rule on that laminated sheet, and I followed them the way I used to run service calls. On time to spec, no complaints in front of the customer. Shirts pressed, the list said, so Tuesdays and Thursdays I set up my wife's old ironing board in the laundry room and pressed my son's work shirts with her iron, the one with the frayed cord I keep meaning to replace. I did collars first. The way she taught me the winter, her hands got too weak to do it herself. My son wears a size 17 neck now. I remember when his whole arm fit in the sleeve. Dresses hung, not folded. I hung them. Bathrooms cleaned every night, so at 9 o'clock I knelt on my bad knee on their bathroom tile and scrubbed the grout while the two of them sat in my living room with their feet on my coffee table, watching a program about strangers renovating other people's houses. I could hear it through the wall. Open concept, a voice kept saying. Buyers love open concept. By Wednesday, she had reset my thermostat to 74. By Thursday, she had changed the internet password because mine was, quote, a security risk. It had been my wife's birthday backwards. The new one, she informed me, would rotate monthly for safety, and she would write it down for me if I behaved myself with it. She said that last part with a little laugh, like we were teasing each other. We were not teasing each other. Friday, she moved my coffee mugs to a lower cabinet. The kitchen needed flow. Her words. My wife's mug went to the back of the shelf, the heavy blue one with the chip on the handle, and I moved it back that night. And the next morning, it was in the lower cabinet again, and neither of us ever said a word about it out loud. That little war went on all 3 weeks, silent as a pilot light. Here is a detail that took me a while to notice, and once I noticed it, I could not stop noticing. In all that time, my daughter-in-law never called me anything. Not Dad, which I would not have expected. Not my name, which is on the deed she was so interested in. Not Sir, not Mr., nothing. She just started sentences at me. The bathrooms need doing. The eggs were loose today. We should talk about the garage. You can live in a man's house, eat his food, sleep under the roof he shingled twice, and never once say his name. Try it sometime. It tells you exactly what you are to a person. My son said Dad plenty. Dad, where's the extension cord? Dad, she doesn't mean it like that. Dad, it's just for a little while. That last one he said so often I started hearing it in my sleep. In his voice at 8 years old, back when a little while meant 5 more minutes in the pool and not a laminated future. I smiled through all of it. I pressed and scrubbed and nodded, and twice that week while they were out, I loaded the bed of my truck under a tarp and made a quiet drive across town, 11 minutes each way, and came back before supper with the tarp folded flat. Nobody asked where I went. That was their first mistake. Well, their second. The first was the doorbell. Day 6 was the chair. My wife had a reading chair in the corner of the living room by the window that gets the 4 o'clock light. Green corduroy, worn pale on the arms, a coffee ring on the left cushion from the afternoon she laughed too hard at something in the newspaper and never let me have it cleaned because, she said, that stain was the funniest thing in the house. She read her seed catalogs in that chair every winter, circling tomatoes we did not have room for. The last year, when the stairs got to be too much some days, she napped in it under the brown Afghan, and I would sit across the room pretending to watch television and actually watching her breathe. I came in from the hardware store on day 6, and the chair was moving. My son had one end. My daughter-in-law was directing traffic with a coffee cup, pointing toward the garage. It dates the room, she was saying, and it does not match the direction we're going. The direction we're going. I set my bag down on the counter. That's her chair, I said. I did not say it loud. I said it the way you tell an apprentice the pipe he is about to cut is live. My son stopped. For about 2 seconds, he was 9 years old again, caught with a baseball and a broken pane behind him. He looked at me, and then he looked at his wife, and I watched him choose. He gripped the chair a little better and said, "We're not throwing it out, Dad. It's just going in the garage." She's right, it kind of... And then he trailed off because there was no honest end to that sentence. They set it in the garage next to the lawnmower and draped a paint tarp over it like a body. That night, after the two of them went upstairs, I went out to the garage with the shop light on and pulled the tarp back and sat down on an overturned bucket next to that chair. And I am not ashamed to tell you I stayed out there a good long while. The coffee ring was still there. The funniest thing in the house. Something settles in a man when he finally quits arguing with the facts. It is almost peaceful. Sitting on that bucket, I stopped hoping the situation would fix itself. Hope had been the last thing holding me back, and my son carried it to the garage with his own 2 hands. Before I went in, I stood in the dark by the workbench and made a phone call. It rang twice. I said, "It's me. I know it's late. I want to move things up sooner." The voice on the other end asked if I was sure. I looked at the shape of my wife's chair under that tarp. "Sooner," I said, and hung up, and went inside and rinsed my mug and slept like a paid invoice. The second week, their mail started showing up at my house. That is how I learned the truth about the lease situation, because nobody in that house was ever going to tell me. Forwarded envelopes with the yellow stickers. A bank, a credit card outfit, another bank. One with final notice stamped in red, addressed to my son. And I stood at my own mailbox holding it for a long minute before I carried it inside and set it on the counter with the grocery flyers, face down, the way you set down a card you were not supposed to see. My neighbor across the street carried mail for 31 years before his knees retired him, and he can read an envelope the way I read a furnace. He was at the end of his driveway that afternoon, and he nodded at the stack in my hand and said, "That's not a lease that got messy. That's an eviction that already happened. Those 2 windowed envelopes, that's a judgment and a collections outfit. I'd bet my pension. He would know. He has watched every piece of paper on this street for 3 decades, and he has watched my house closer than most since my wife passed, in the way good neighbors do without ever saying so. So, my son was not between leases. My son had been put out. March, as I later learned, which meant they had been floating somewhere for for weeks before my porch, and pride or shame or his wife's arithmetic had brought them to my doorbell last. I want to tell you what that did to me, because it was not what you might think. It did not make me angry. It gutted me. That boy used to bring me every report card at a dead run. He called me from the road the day he got his first work truck, so excited he could barely drive it. And somewhere between that phone call and my porch, he had learned to hide a drowning from his own father. That night, I nearly told him everything. I took 2 cold beers from the garage refrigerator and went up the stairs, and I stood outside the guest room door rehearsing it. Son, I know about the townhouse. Son, I have money set aside, and I have plans you don't know about. And there is a way through this that does not involve laminated paper, but you have to talk to me like I'm your father and not a bed and breakfast. I raised my hand to knock. Down the hall, the bathroom door opened, and my daughter-in-law's voice came around the corner before she did. There you are. The grout in our shower is going gray again. It needs doing tonight, not tomorrow. It's on the list. She looked at the 2 beers in my hand and then at me, and she smiled with the front of her face. Celebrating something? No, I said. Wrong door. I went back downstairs and I put the beers away, and I got the grout brush, and I knelt on my bad knee on their bathroom floor at 9 o'clock at night, and whatever I had been about to offer through that door, I scrubbed it down the drain with the mildew. Mercy needs a crack to get in through. She caulked everyone she found. By the middle of the second week, my hallway had a rash. Paint samples. Little taped squares in colors with names like Agreeable Gray and Modern Fog. Marching down the wall, my wife and I had painted twice in 31 years. Both times a yellow she called Morning Butter. My daughter-in-law stood back from them with her arms crossed and her head tilted, an artist at her easel, and measured the den with the tape app on her phone. This wall wants to come down, she said to nobody, tapping the plaster with one knuckle. All of this wants to open up. Walls do not want anything. I know those walls. I ran ducked through them the summer my son learned to ride a bike in the driveway. But I said nothing, because by then I had gotten good at saying nothing, and saying nothing is easier when you know the meter is already running. That Thursday evening, I was out at the back fence with my hands in the tomato bed when I heard her voice through the kitchen screen, bright and carrying. The voice of a woman who has never once worried about being overheard because she has never once believed the overhearers matter. She was on the phone with her sister. No, listen, she said. Once this place is ours, we're gutting everything. Kitchen first. That kitchen is 1992 in there. Then the wall, then floors. Honestly, the bones are great. It just needs someone with vision. A pause while her sister said something. She laughed. He's easy, she said. He irons. I stood in my wife's garden with dirt on my hands and listened to myself be summarized. He's easy. He irons. My son was in that kitchen too. I could see the shape of him through the screen, leaning on the counter I installed, and he did not say one word. He studied the floor she was planning to tear out like it owed him money. 2 days later, a truck idled at my curb with a magnetic sign on the door. A landscaping outfit, free estimates. A young fellow in sunglasses walked my backyard with her while I watched from the garage. She swept her arm across the fence line, across the tomatoes, the zinnias, my wife's stubborn rosebush, all of it. Clean hardscape, she was saying. Low maintenance, maybe a fire feature. The fellow nodded and shot laser measurements at the rosebush like it was a survey stake. That rosebush went in the ground the year our boy was born. It has outlived a blight, 3 ice storms, and the woman who planted it. It was not going to outlive a fire feature. That night, after their light went out, I took a screwdriver to the pantry doorway and backed out 6 screws, quiet as prayer, and lifted off the strip of trim with the pencil marks. 2 years old up to 15. Every birthday. His mother's handwriting next to the dates. I wrapped it in a moving blanket and set it in a box in the garage, in with some things I'd already packed, and I taped the lid. If she noticed the bare doorway, she never said. It was not on her list. The second Saturday, she threw a little party in my living room. 2 co-workers and their husbands, a bottle of white wine sweating on my coffee table, and a cheese board she arranged for 20 minutes like it was going in a magazine. I was not invited exactly. I was informed. Some people from my office are coming by around 7, she said at 4 o'clock. The way you tell a dog he will be staying in the yard. Fine by me. I mowed the back while there was light, and when I came in through the kitchen door around 8 for a glass of water, sweat through my shirt and grass on my boots, one of the husbands was standing at the island with his wine. He looked me up and down, friendly enough, and said, "Oh, hey, are you the handyman? Because we've been looking for a reliable guy." The room got quiet for about half a breath. My son was right there on the arm of the sofa. Right there. It would have cost him 4 words. That's my dad and his house. 4 words, 5 if you count a breath. He looked into his glass, and my daughter-in-law laughed, a bright hostess laugh, and touched the man's arm and said, "Oh no, that's just," and then she waved her hand at me, at all of me, the boots and the sweat and the 68 years, and said, "He comes with the house." Everybody chuckled. Somebody said, "Lucky you." The conversation moved along to school districts. He comes with the house. I filled my glass at the tap, drank it where I stood, rinsed it, set it in the rack, and said goodnight to the room. A couple of them said goodnight back, warm as anything. Nice people, probably. Nice people laugh at a lot of things when the hostess laughs first. I will tell you the strangest part. Walking down my own hallway past the paint samples, I was almost grateful to her. Almost. Because until that sentence, some soft-hearted part of me was still looking for an exit ramp, still whispering that maybe this was all just stress and bad manners, that maybe come autumn we would all laugh about the laminated sheet at a family dinner. He comes with the house. She had finally said out loud what the list had been saying since 9:47 that first night. I was not family being helped. I was a fixture being tolerated, like a water heater that talks. The next morning was Sunday, and Sundays my neighbor comes over early with a thermos of coffee, and we do a little work in the garage before the street wakes up. That particular Sunday, we taped up 4 more boxes and loaded 2 into his hatchback, because a pickup truck making trips draws eyes, but a retired mailman running errands is invisible, and he has enjoyed that fact more than any man I ever met. He set the last box in with a grunt and said, "You sure about the timeline?" 12 days, I said. Give or take a signature. He looked at the house, at the window where the guest room curtains were drawn. "And you're still not going to tell the boy?" "I keep trying," I said, and it was the truth. Something keeps closing my mouth. He screwed the lid onto his thermos and studied me the way he used to study a loose porch step on his route. "Son," he said, and he is one of maybe 2 living men allowed to call me that. "Whatever it is that keeps closing your mouth, I'd let it. A man who watched you get handed a chore sheet in your own doorway has forfeited a certain amount of advance notice." Then he drove my wife's good china to a storage unit 11 minutes away, doing 26 and a 25, and waved at every yard he passed. Of course, you cannot pack up a life inside an occupied house without somebody eventually looking sideways at a box, and my daughter-in-law was a woman built for looking sideways. It was a Tuesday when she did her walkthrough of my garage. She came out with her list under her arm, which she had taken to carrying around the house like a clipboard, patrolling. She stood in front of the stack of taped boxes in the corner, 8 of them by then, and tapped the top one with a fingernail. "What's all this?" "Donations," I told her, not looking up from the mower blade I was sharpening. "Church drive. They take furniture, dishes, the works. Truck comes end of the month." She nodded slowly, walking the stack like an auditor. "Good," she said. "This garage has a lot of potential." Then she stopped at the tarp in the corner, the one shaped exactly like a green corduroy chair, and for a second I thought she would pull it back. She didn't. Even she had rules she followed without knowing it. A few days on, she asked about the hall closet. "Why is this half empty? Where are all the coats?" "Decluttering," I said. "They tell seniors to do that. There are whole programs about it on television." She liked that answer so much, she repeated it to my son at dinner. "Your dad's finally decluttering," she said, pleased, the way you would report that an old dog had at last learned the stairs. "See? He knows." And once, standing on the front porch with her coffee, she pointed her mug at the little steel box clipped to the porch rail, the one with the dial on its face. "What is that thing?" "Pest control," I said. "They need access when I'm out." "Ants." She wrinkled her nose at the word ants and never looked at the box again. It hung there by my front door for 2 weeks, 3 feet from her head every time she came or went, and she walked past it the way people walk past fire extinguishers, certain it was somebody else's business. Here is what I noticed, and once I noticed it, I could not stop noticing. She asked what things were. She never once asked why. Not why a widower would suddenly thin out his closets, not why the garage was growing boxes, not why the man who came Wednesday in a green polo walked every room of the house with a tablet muttering numbers. That one was close, I will grant you. She came home early from her exercise class and caught him in the den with his tablet out. "Who's this?" And I said, "Furnace man, annual service." And that estimator, God bless him, did not miss a beat. He knocked twice on the wall like it was ductwork and said, "She's breathing real nice, this house." And my daughter-in-law said, "Well, we may be replacing all that anyway," and went upstairs to change. He looked at me. I looked at him. Neither of us said one word, and his written estimate was in my mailbox by Friday in a plain envelope, addressed in pen. In 3 weeks under my roof, that woman inspected everything and questioned nothing, because people who believe they already own you do not ask questions. They take inventory. The paperwork talk arrived at dinner on a Wednesday, served between the meatloaf and the green beans like it was a side dish. She brought it up the way you would suggest a board game. "So," she said, folding her napkin just so, "we've been thinking. We should really get the house transferred while everyone's healthy. It's just smart, tax-wise. Probate is a nightmare. Everybody says so. I'll set it all up. You won't have to lift a finger. I know someone at a title office. I can have them come right to the house. You literally just sign. You literally just sign." She said it warmly, generously, like she was offering to carry something heavy for me. I chewed my meatloaf. My son pushed his beans around his plate, and then he did the one decent thing he managed that whole 3rd week. He said, "Quiet," to his plate more than to her. "Only if Dad wants to." And she patted the back of his hand. Twice. Pat, pat. The way you settle a child who has interrupted the adults and said, "Of course, honey, that's what I'm saying. It's what's best for everyone," and kept her eyes on me the entire time she said it. I set my fork down and I told her that sounded very organized. You would have thought I proposed a toast. She lit up. "It is," she said. "It really is. That's all this is. Organization." That Friday, a manila folder appeared on my nightstand. I found it after the bathrooms, 9:40 at night, sitting square in the lamplight like it had an appointment. Inside, printed off the internet, a quitclaim deed form, our county's name right at the top, and my name typed into the grantor line, spelled correctly, which meant she had gone and checked. Little sticky flags marched down the margin, pointing at the signature lines. "Sign here, here, initial here," a note clipped to the front in her hand. "Whenever you get a chance, no rush," with the exclamation points. Always the exclamation points, cheerful as a knife in a birthday cake. I sat at the kitchen table with that folder at 2 in the morning. In the quiet a house only makes when it knows you best, and I read every line of it by the stovelight. Grantor releases and quitclaims. All rights, title, title, and interest for the sum of $1 and other good and valuable consideration. $1, 31 years of mortgage payments, a roof, 2 water heaters, 14 months of carrying my wife up those stairs when she could not manage them, and the paper valued all of it at $1 and other good and valuable consideration. I did not sign anything. I put her folder in my truck, in the console, right on top of the other folder, the one from the week before the doorbell, the one none of them had ever thought to imagine. They made a strange pair riding around town together, those 2 futures for one house. Only one of them was notarized. That Sunday evening, my son found me in the driveway with the hood of my truck up, and for a little while it was 20 years ago. He drifted over the way he used to as a teenager, hands in his pockets, pretending he had wandered out for no reason. He held the light for me while I checked the belt. He asked what the ticking was and I told him, and he nodded like the boy who used to sit on the fender watching me like I was performing surgery. For 10 minutes, neither of us mentioned his wife, or the list, or the paint samples, and I remembered with a pain like a stitch how easy he is to love when it is just the 2 of us and an engine. Then he cleared his throat, and the boy went away, and a tired 35-year-old man stood in my driveway in the dusk. "Dad," he said, "about the townhouse. It wasn't really a lease thing." "I know," I said. I did not say how. He let out a breath he had maybe been holding since March. "It all just got away from us," he said, talking fast now, the words falling over each other. "The cards, and then her hours got cut, and the truck payment, and we were behind before I even understood we were behind. They put our stuff on the curb, Dad. There were people going through our stuff on the curb." I closed the hood soft and wiped my hands and let him talk, because a father learns the sound of a confession, and the worst thing you can do is interrupt one. "I should have told you," he said. "I was ashamed. You always kept everything so." And he waved his hand at the truck, at the house, at me, so handled. "Son," I said, "I have been broke. I was broke when you were born. Your mother and I ate Navy beans 4 nights a week. The winter, the furnace business almost went under. Broke is a season. It is nothing to hide from your own father." And for 1 second, 1 whole second, we stood on the edge of the honest version of everything. I felt the folder in my truck console not 10 feet away. I felt the words lining up. "Son, sit down on this tailgate. There is something I have to tell you about this house." Then he said it. "That's kind of why," he said, and his eyes went somewhere over my shoulder, to the house, to her window. "That's why the transfer makes sense, Dad. The deed thing. If the house is in our names, the equity, we could breathe again. And honestly, it's a lot of house for you. It'd be safer all around. She's right about that part. She's actually thinking about your future too, you know. Word for word. Her rhythm, her arithmetic. Coming out of the mouth I taught to whistle." He must have seen something move in my face, because he added quickly, "Nobody's rushing you. Whenever you get a chance. No rush." I said. "Right," he said, relieved. "No rush." I told him goodnight and went inside, and that was the moment, if you are keeping track, that I stopped rehearsing how to tell them and started rehearsing how not to. Thursday night of the 3rd week, she made an announcement at dinner, and she made it holding a glass. She had bought sparkling cider, the kind with the foil top, and she poured 3 glasses like we had won something. "Good news," she said. "My title contact can come tomorrow morning. First thing, before work. Everything's drawn up. All you have to do is sign at the flags." And then she raised her glass and looked around my kitchen with the deep satisfaction of a woman surveying a before photo. "Then it's handled. To keeping the house in the family." "To family," my son echoed, half a beat behind, the way men toast at funerals. I raised my glass of cider and I drank to keeping the house in the family, and if either of them had been watching my eyes instead of their own futures, the whole thing might have ended right there. "What time tomorrow?" I asked. 8, she said. 8:15, before I have to be at the office. "Better make it breakfast for 4 then," I said. And she actually smiled at me, warm as anything, and said, "See, this is going to be good for all of us," and squeezed my son's shoulder, and he looked at his cider and said nothing at all. I cleared the plates. I washed them by hand, taking my time, and then I told them I was going to check on the tomatoes before dark, which was true. I have not told one lie in this entire story that was not about boxes, closets, or pest control. Out by the back fence, in the last of the light, with my wife's rose bush at my elbow, I made a phone call. She picked up on the second ring. My agent, a sharp woman about my son's age who had spent 3 weeks respecting the strangest listing conditions of her career. No yard sign, no lockbox photos online, showings only on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, 10 to noon, when a certain exercise class met across town. She had asked me once, early on, if I was hiding the sale from somebody dangerous. Something like that, I told her. Family. Change of plans, I said to her now. Quiet, with the screen door in my sightline. Tomorrow morning. Can your closing gal come at 6 instead of 8:30? And the buyers at 7. 6, she said. In the morning. They'll want to know why. Tell them the seller's an early riser, I said. Tell them breakfast is at 6 sharp in this house. It's on a list somewhere. There was a pause, and then that woman laughed the way people laugh when they finally see the whole board. 6 o'clock, she said. I'll bring the sign. I have been carrying that sign in my trunk for 3 weeks like a spare tire. Tomorrow you get to use it, I said, and hung up, and picked one ripe tomato, and went inside. That night, I did not sleep much, and I did not try hard. Around 2, I walked the house in the dark, the way you can only walk a house you have memorized. I stood in the kitchen, and laid my hand flat on the counter I set in 1998. I stood at the bare pantry doorway where the trim used to be. I stood at the window where her chair used to catch the 4 o'clock light, and where a white sofa with the tag still on it now sat in the dark like a parked ambulance. Thank you, I told the house. I kept it to that. The house and I had already said the longer version to each other over 4 quiet years, and anyway, some conversations are private, even in a story like this one. Then I set my alarm for 5:15 and slept the 2 best hours of my month. Friday morning, I was in the kitchen at 5:45, same as every morning under the rules. Bacon in the pan, 6 strips, laid out straight, eggs over easy, yolks intact, coffee on the table at 6 when sharp, cream on the left. If you are going to set a trap with a clock, you had better be a man who respects the clock, and I have never once in my life been late for a job. This was a job. My daughter-in-law came down early for once, robe belted tight, hair clipped up, already moving like a woman with a ceremony to run. She took her laminated list down off the refrigerator, where it had hung for 3 weeks over the photograph of my wife holding our boy on his first birthday, and she carried it under her arm like a clipboard. She was actually humming. "Big day," she said to the kitchen in general. She even smiled at me. "Don't worry about all the legal words. I flagged everywhere you sign. It's all standard." My son came down with his shirt tucked in for once and would not look at either of us. He stood at the counter and drank his coffee standing up, the way men drink coffee before surgeries and sentencings. At 6 miles on the nose, the doorbell rang. One press, polite, professional, the doorbell of somebody billing by the hour. My daughter-in-law lit up like a porch light. "She's early," she said, delighted, straightening her robe. "Even better. We'll be done before breakfast is cold." And she went for my front door with her list under her arm and her folder of flags in her hand, and I turned the bacon with a fork and did not follow, because I had waited 3 weeks and I could wait 15 more feet. I heard the door open. I heard her voice go into its hostess register. "Hi, you must be from the title office. Perfect timing. Come in, come in. We're transferring a deed today." And a calm, pleasant, unhurried voice, a voice with a leather folder in it, said, "Good morning. I am from the title company." My daughter-in-law turned around in my front hallway and smiled at me through the kitchen doorway. I will remember that smile as long as I live. It was triumphant. It was generous even. It was the smile of a woman watching the moving truck of her future back slowly into the driveway. Beep, beep, beep. She smiled at me like we had finally, after 3 long weeks, gotten me organized. Then the woman in the gray blazer stepped all the way into the light of my hallway, set her leather folder against her hip, glanced at the suitcase still sitting by the stairs, and finished her sentence. "For the closing," she said, "the buyers do their final walkthrough at 7. You must be the family renting a room from the cellar." Nobody moved. The bacon ticked in the pan behind me. Somewhere down the block, a garage door hummed. My son set his coffee down on the counter with the careful, deliberate motion of a man who has just felt the floor become a question. I turned off the burner. Some part of me had planned that, I think. I did not want smoke in the house for this. "Renting," my daughter-in-law said. Her voice came out with a little laugh attached, the way a car with a dead battery still clicks. No, there's been a mix-up. We live here. This is a family home. We're transferring it today. I have the paperwork right here." And she actually held up her folder of flags, as if the flags were the law. The woman in the gray blazer looked at the folder politely, the way a surgeon looks at a home remedy. "I'm sorry for the confusion," she said. "This property closed out of escrow paperwork last week. Signing was completed and notarized. Funds are held pending Monday 9 a.m. This morning I placed the lockbox key for the buyers and complete the pre-closing walk. It's all scheduled." She glanced at her folder with the seller, and then, because there was no reason left not to, I said it from my own kitchen, in a voice I kept as level as a new floor. "I signed the papers 8 days before you two rang my doorbell. Full asking price. It closes Monday at 9. My son turned around. "Dad," he said. Just that. One word, and his whole boyhood in it. His wife was faster. She was always going to be faster. She wheeled from the door, robe swinging, and her face did something I had never seen it do, which was stop performing. "You can't," she said. "You can't have. He can't have." She turned to the woman in the blazer, and her voice found a new gear. Smooth, concerned, confidential. "I'm sorry. You should know. He's not well. He's been confused lately, forgetting things. He never mentioned any sale. A man his age can't just... There are protections. We're his family. And honestly, we've been worried about his judgment for a while now, which is why we moved in." There it was, in front of a licensed stranger and my own son. 3 weeks of the plan said out loud at last, dressed up as concern. Not one soul in that hallway missed it, least of all the woman with the folder, who had, I would guess, heard some version of that speech in doorways before. "Sir," she asked me, calm as a form, "did you review the purchase agreement with independent counsel?" "I did," I said. "My attorney of 11 years, the one who did my wife's estate, notarized on a Monday, witnessed twice, copies in my truck, my safe deposit box, and his office." She nodded, made a small check somewhere in her folder, and that check mark was the whole verdict. Then she stepped past my daughter-in-law, gentle as traffic, walked to the porch rail, spun the dial on the little steel box that had hung there for 2 weeks, 3 feet from that woman's head every morning, and set the front door key inside it. "Pest control," my daughter-in-law said, barely a voice at all. "You said pest control." "I did," I said, in a way. The screen door creaked, and my neighbor came up the walk in his slippers with his thermos, moving with the unhurried stride of a man arriving precisely on time for something he has known about for 3 weeks. He nodded good morning to the woman in the blazer like colleagues. He did not gloat. He just took up a position at the end of my porch the way he once stood at mailboxes, official, present, a witness with coffee. "You knew," my daughter-in-law said to him. Then to me, everyone knew. The furnace man, the boxes. She was moving now, hallway to kitchen and back, robe flapping, doing the math out loud. The boxes aren't donations. Movers come Saturday, I said. The closet was never decluttering either. And through the open door to the garage, where the light was on, you could see the top box open by the workbench, and sticking up out of the moving blanket, a strip of white door frame trim with pencil marks up the side, 2 years old to 15, in handwriting nobody in that hallway needed identified. My son looked at that piece of trim for a long moment, and something in his face finally finished falling. It came out of him all at once then. The townhouse, the eviction, the curb, the debt, right there in front of her, and the title woman, and the neighbor, and God, and everybody. 3 months of secrets paying out like a snapped cable, and he ended it looking at me, saying, "I'm sorry, Dad, I'm sorry. We were never going to," and then stopping, because he was, after all, still standing next to the flagged folder that said otherwise. His wife did not comfort him. She turned on him. "You knew he was like this," she said, which was, I believe, the truest thing she said in 3 weeks, though not in the way she meant it. At 6:55, a small sedan pulled to the curb, and a young couple got out, holding hands and a strip of paint samples of their own, and stood at the end of my walk looking up at the house the way my wife and I looked at it once. 31 years and 2 water heaters ago. I took the laminated list from under my daughter-in-law's arm. She let me. All the voltage had gone out of her. I smoothed it flat once against my shirt, and I handed it back into her hands the way she had handed it into mine, formal, with both. "You'll want to keep this," I said. "I hear the new owners have expectations, too." My agent's car pulled in behind the sedan, and she got out smiling, and she opened her trunk. She was still standing in my doorway in her robe, holding her rules, when the sold sign went into the yard.